Hey kiddos, you know what to do. It's Friday, so about work today is one best thing. I told the sub to give you about 3 minutes to fill this out, so let's do it quickly and then get on with prayer. After prayer's over, you can restart the video. So right now, pause it. Alright, so yesterday we talked about sin. What is sin? How do we define it? What makes an action morally wrong or morally right? Today we're going to talk a little bit more about what are things that move us toward or away from sin. So first let's talk about the things that get us to sin. Number 1, concupiscence. This, if you remember, is one of your vocab words. It's a fancy word for the tendency to sin that we are born with. We as humans, unfortunately, find sin to be alluring. It can be very seductive, and so we oftentimes choose it. Another thing that can point us towards sin more often than not are vices. Vices are practices or habits that lead us to sin. So things that tend to make us more susceptible toward choosing sin, practices or habits that do that. They can also be repeating sins. So if you do a sin multiple times, it might make you a little more immune to it, and then that can lead you to more and greater sins. We often call this, if you remember from Scripture, the cycle of sin, that sin begets more sin, begets more sin. It often compounds on itself. Take a second, pause the video, and jot these down. Now that you got that down, with your sister, I want you to brainstorm some potential vices. What are some things you could see as vices, or some sins that people repeat that can lead to more sins? So take 3 minutes with your sister and brainstorm a couple ideas. Pause the video, and in 3 minutes, check back in. All right, what I want you to do is every table group is going to take a second and share one that they come up with. So every table group, you're just going to share one to the greater class, and then after everyone's shared, unpause the video and move to the next slide. So, some examples of vices: jealousy, anger, sloth, meaning laziness, cowardice, impatience. All of those 7 deadly sins you've heard of are also called the cardinal vices. So wrath, lust, gluttony, all of those things are vices. Take a second and jot these down. Now that you got them down, I want you to take just a minute, let's say 2 minutes maybe, to figure out and respond in your little box. How do these attitudes or behaviors move us closer to sin? So why are vices potentially dangerous for us if we're trying to avoid sin? Take 2 minutes to do this, and then you can unpause the video and move on. Okay, now we get to be a little more positive. So we don't want to sin, hopefully. Hope not. So what do we do to help us choose good instead if we have these natural tendencies and potentially bad habits? Well, I'm glad you asked. We work to build up virtues. Virtues are the opposite of vices. They are a habitual and firm disposition, so a commitment toward the good, also known as or also describing habits of good actions. So repeatedly doing good things so it becomes a habit, so it becomes second nature. Go ahead and brainstorm some virtues that would be helpful habits to have as a teenager. Give yourself about 3 or 4 minutes with your partner to both take the notes on what a virtue is and brainstorm some virtues that would be helpful as a teenager. Pause the video for about 4 minutes. All right, now that you got some awesome virtues all planned out, we're going to take note of the cardinal virtues. The cardinal virtues are these super, super important and helpful virtues to foster in your life. They're like the number 4, top 4 ones to have, and the church makes it very clear that they're essential to fostering a healthy faith life. So we're going to look at what those 4 cardinal virtues are now. Number 1, prudence. Prudence is also known as wise judgment. It allows one to be thoughtful and objective when making moral decisions. So it's important that, like, in the heat of a moment, you're just not being rash or impulsive. Prudence allows you to slow down, take a minute, and really make a conscious decision, and to do it objectively and thoughtfully. So prudence is very important when we're going to talk about morality. So we got to start fostering the virtue of prudence so we can make wise judgments. Then we get fortitude, or strength, courage. Sometimes it's really hard to do the right thing, especially when there's outside pressures trying to tell you not to. So fortitude really helps us to choose the right, to choose the good, even when it's challenging, difficult, maybe even when it is inconvenient. We stay true, we stay strong and courageous in order to really foster our morality and to choose the good. Justice. A huge virtue is a sense of justice, is to be accountable, responsible, hint, hint, going back to 2 days ago, to really think about the needs of others and not just ourselves. So when I make a decision, when I'm paying attention to my morality, it's not just about what benefits me. It's about, how is this action? Sure, I can buy this shirt. It's really cute. It's really inexpensive. But who's making the shirt? How are they being treated? Is it an ethical company? Really thinking about how my actions impact more than just myself. This also ties to our relationship with God, making sure that we're giving our neighbor, or all humanity, all creation, its due, as well as God. And you do that partly by taking care of our neighbors, because that's what God wants. And finally, temperance. We all need a little bit of balance in our lives. It's very easy to go to the extreme in many cases. Think about the Buddha, right? He had to learn not a super luxurious life as a prince, and not a super ascetic life to the point that he's starving and not engaging in encountering. So it's about seeking balance in our lives, being able to have self-control. I may love cookies, but I can eat 1 cookie instead of 5 cookies. So having balance in the decisions that we're making as well. Go ahead and pause the video and make sure you got all of these virtues down on your worksheet before moving to the next slide. Speaking of balance, we oftentimes are in a rush during the holiday season, here at Holy Names, in numerous capacities. So I'm going to invite you to spend the rest of class reflecting and really kind of tying it back to your own life, your own experience. There are a couple reflection questions on the back of your handout for guidance. You can deviate from them as long as it's in the realm of virtues, vices, personal reflection. Feel free to journal, draw, bullet list, however you really want to process your thoughts and feelings around these questions on the back of your sheet. You will be turning it in. I'm not going to necessarily read and dive into what are your thoughts or feelings about everything. But please, you're going to spend the rest of class doing this quietly. This is not a group activity. It's not a neighbor activity. And I'm going to insist no music, no technology, because it's good for our mental health to take a break, to reflect, to just pause from the busyness. So that's what we're going to do. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I will see you on Monday.